One way of improving performance from the perspective of images is we want to reduce the number of requests that are made between a browser and a server. Typical web pages today make upwards of about 100 requests to get all of the images, JavaScript, CSS files. So one of the approaches for images is to take advantage of what are called CSS sprites. And the idea is to, instead of having a lot of small images that you reference individually from your page, you can actually combine all those small images into a single larger image, make one request, and then use CSS to index into that single larger image to pull out the small image that you need. And again, the goal is to reduce the number of requests that are made. So we're trying to typically don't do this for medium or large size images, but there's lots of little images for borders and logos and things like that on a site that can be typically combined into sprites. There's lots of different tools and techniques you can use to create a sprite. I'm going to show one, for instance, of an online website where you can take a zip of the images that you want to put into a sprite, go to that site, and it will actually generate for you the combined image and all of the CSS you need in order to incorporate those into your page and reference the individual images inside the sprite. We're going to walk through the process of creating a CSS sprite file. So the first thing I do is I create a zip and I identify the images that I want to place into the sprite. So I want to take email, Facebook, and Twitter. Those are small enough that I would like to include those in this, so I make a copy. Then I can go to the web page that we had specified earlier, and what it will ask for first is for me to browse and pull up that particular zip file. There are lots of settings I can set. I can resize the images, I can control whether they're vertical or horizontal, spacing in between them, what output format I want them to be in. I'm just going to leave the defaults and say create the sprite image and CSS. And what it will do, it's created the sprite for me, so I can simply click here and save that sprite file. And I can also take the CSS rules that will allow me to index into that particular sprite file. So the first thing we'll notice is we're in paint.net looking at the image. It's got one combined image with the three individual files. It leaves some spacing in there just in case when you index with the CSS, due to browser differences, that it doesn't accidentally pick up part of another image. But this is the image we're now going to use. And then if we go back and look at, we had a web page that before just used image tags and referenced them as you would expect. With the CSS Sprite version, there's multiple ways to do this. I chose to do this with a span. So I've got a span here with a class of Sprite Facebook. Now that was given to me by the website, and it knows already how to index. So it says that will pull from that same image, so that's the combined image. But what you'll notice is each of these has a slightly different background position. So that's how it indexes in to reference those individual files. So as you can see, because it's using background images, there's a couple side effects, like when you print, those by default in browsers don't typically print, the background images don't. And there's some things you want to be aware with this technique, but it is a good way to reduce the number of small images on your website. So just to demonstrate the benefits again, our goal was to reduce the number of files that needed to be requested from the browser to the server by combining images into a single file. So here's my version where I had no CSS sprites and it just used individual files. And if I were to look at the fiddler trace for that, you can see it requested the HTML and then it had to request each of those images individually. If I turn around and go back to the CSS Sprite version now, I can look at Fiddler and see that instead of requesting 3 files, it now only has to request 1. It's slightly larger than the others, but basically the benefits again are the number of requests between a browser and server has a huge impact on how long it takes a page to be requested. So if we can take a substantial number of small images on our page and compress them into basically one single image, it's going to have a big impact on performance for our site. Many major websites do this, so if you use Fiddler and hit any major sites, you can see that they're taking advantage of CSS sprites for the performance benefits.